Okay, so it's not news to any of you that hydropower is flexible. It is, it's reliable. It can come back from black start capabilities. When all of our power goes out, hydropower is there to bring us back online. So it's incredibly valuable. Next slide, please. And so ultimately, you know, it's going to be the answer to, you know, a carbon-free future. So ultimately, we need to address the workforce issue, which is the next slide, please. There are jobs in all 50 states for hydropower. We have most of them, you know, can be rural, but also beautiful locations. You're at a dam. I'm in Littleton, Colorado, and we've driven out to Mount Albert, which is the Twin Lakes, and beautiful place to camp, as well as just see the pump storage plant there, which is really cool. So while some of the job opportunities do take you to rural places, there's obviously lots of jobs that you can have outside of that. And I'm looking at my students right now because we have students here that are participating in our Think Tank Unplugged program. And we're hoping that they are future water power workers. So I'm going to embarrass you to make you stand up. This is Colin and Kyle and Mark. Oh, shoot, sorry. Hi, Mark. We'll all remember Mark now. Keep the man on your But in all seriousness, they're bright and shining and walking around the conference. So definitely take a moment to say hi to them as you're going through. So it's also not a surprise to you that our workforce is aging and people are retiring, and ultimately we need to replace them with qualified candidates. And even more so, it's a problem to actually transfer the knowledge on. Hydro used to be a very family-oriented business where, you know, the dad started on the business and then he passed it on to the son, and then us, you know, as we all get our own opinions on what we want to do in life, that has taken a turn. So it's no longer that family business, even though we feel like Hydro's a big family. We're not all actually related, and so we do have to have young people come in and introduce them to the newest innovation. It can be exciting. We realize that we're a little bit in competition with solar and wind, but we shouldn't be, because ultimately they all work together, you know, in integration. And so if we can all work together, then I think the future is bright. So next slide, please. So in response to this specific issue, in 2015, the foundation got together with NREL, and we created the STEM Workforce Development Program. So we have, within that project, we have done curricular assessments of universities within the U.S. We've surveyed students to understand the perceptions around what they think of hydropower and marine energy. And we've also talked to industry. We've talked to you all to see, you know, if young people are ready for their careers once they start them, if they're getting the education that they need in order to be prepared for the jobs that they are filling. So we've done all of those assessments. We've met with many of you, industry and academia, online over the last year and a half through our STEM Dialogue series to bridge the gap and really be able to have these conversations so that we can make sure that we're continuing this project, but we're not doing it in a bubble. We're making sure that we're talking to you all and learning what you all need so that we can provide that. We don't want to just assume we know. So next slide, please. Part of this project leads us here to talk about the Hydropower Collegiate Competition. Oh, I skipped over. Do you have access to the video that was on there? So another piece of our project is the educational portal. So we created one for marine energy and we created one for hydropower. And part of that portal is gathering all materials, hydropower and marine energy related, and housing them under one place. So anybody interested in learning more can easily find it. We heard from teachers that they would teach more on these subjects if they felt more confident about it and if they had access to the materials. So Becky's sitting in here, so I keep looking at her because we work together on this project as well. Becky is with Mead, and they have, through this project, created a hydropower curricula. So that is available on the portal, and is also, they're going to be working on the marine energy side of things. So there will be a marine energy curricula as well. So it's really cool to see all of this come together because it's been a 3-year process, and bit by bit we're just continuing to take on more. So it's really making a difference. So with this portal, we also created these day in the life videos, which was timely with COVID. Having a very virtual world. So we created these day in the life videos so that young people could see themselves in hydro and in marine energy through the videos. So if you can play that, I wanted to play one for you real quick. Do we need to come back to it or? So this is Allison Frechette with Brookfield Renewable Energy.
In the hydropower industry, when I was trained to become a whitewater guide on the rivers in Maine, I was traveling through the recreation facilities on the Kennebec and Penobscot rivers, and it was then that I realized the impact that these facilities have on the recreation industry, and I was certain I wanted to know more at that point. Hydropower is a zero emissions, renewable source of energy that almost every state in the United States utilizes. Hydro facilities are a key component in stabilized river flows, climate resiliency, and renewable energy generation, which provides benefits for the environment, recreation, and local economy. In the warm summer months, I find myself out inspecting sites for public safety risks or overseeing the maintenance of our recreation facilities. But during the cold weather months, I find myself working in the office, collaborating with our operations and dam safety teams on reports and submittals to the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. What I like most about my job is I'm always learning. I'm consistently faced with new challenges, and I get to work with a great team on these new challenges. I think we are on the front lines of sustainably balancing our natural resources and providing energy solutions that accelerate our nation and our world towards a sustainable low carbon future. My advice to the next generation is that the industry itself is vast, and it takes all types of people from all different backgrounds to support one another in this industry. I think being part of the hydropower industry is a great way to be part of making this world a better place.
Now, if that doesn't make you want to work in hydro, like, I can't help you. So that, I mean, the day in the life videos will continue to be made as long as the budget allows. We continue to, want to make a few more each year, and so that's been a really cool part of this project to get to know honestly the people behind the videos, but also be able to learn more about how they get into hydro. Because I don't know if I asked all of you, I'd say most of you probably kind of fell into hydro, or at least I did. But I haven't left, and here we are 8 years later, so I have no intention of leaving. So why do I share all of this? I share all of this to get to our Hydropower Collegiate Competition. Through this project, we were able to successfully run 2 marine energy collegiate competitions And they were intended to be in person, but they managed to run successful competitions virtually, and are continuing on with a third one in 2022. And so we want to replicate that in hydropower. It's only fair. And so we are here today. We want to just kind of share some of the ideas that we've gotten. We've had our STEM dialogue series workshop on the Hydropower Collegiate Competition, where we were able to talk to students, talk to professors, and talk to industry to find out, thoughts on the HCC. It always has to have an acronym. And so we took some of those ideas, and then now we've put together some thoughts around that, and wanted to kind of share with you where we're at. So if you'll hit the next slide, please. Ultimately, our goal is to, share the good news of hydropower. We see from students through our surveys that there is a mixed message about hydropower. They kind of see it as a solved problem, that it's old, it's not exciting like solar and wind. And so we need to make sure that they're learning the actual message, that there's a lot of innovation, that pump storage is the future, and there's a lot of exciting things happening in hydro. We have challenges, but we are going to meet them, not hide from them. And we're electrifying the hydro industry with the next generation of workers by doing that. So those are the main goals for the HCC. So far through our efforts, we have Hydropower Collegiate Competition survey out circulating. It actually closes at the end of the month, and so you will all be getting that virtually. So I'm going to be sending that out. So please fill that out. Some of you already have. I was going to have them printed today, but I don't think that we're in a printed world anymore with all the Clean Currents apps and different things. So I thought, well, I'm just going to send it directly to you right after this workshop, and then you'll be able to complete it that way. We've done a lot of information gathering. We have been meeting with our MOU partners, with the Army Corps and the Bureau of Reclamation, to get their ideas. And I mentioned the dialogue series as well. So, and obviously we have the collegiate wind competitions that have gone on before us, and the marine energy collegiate competition. So we're trying to learn from those so that we can make sure that we can kick off a successful competition in hydro. Next slide, please. So our thoughts around the application process: we would like to be able to launch it in January of 22, begin accepting applications in March, and make those selections in May, which also requires putting together a steering committee of people to make those selections and review the application. And assuming that steering committee could be made up of industry, academia, maybe even previous students who might have been through some of the other competitions. We'd like to be able to then host the events in May 2023. We say Water Power Week, we're kind of making an assumption there. So if there's other ones we should be considering, but ultimately we want it to be co-located with a conference. That's kind of what we've heard, but we are obviously looking for ideas. So if anybody has additional ideas, share them with us. And we keep it simple. The application process, we don't want to turn students away by making it too cumbersome. Just a simple 5-page application. They'll get together, with their friends and hopefully make their teams. And the prize funding, we're thinking around $10,000. And I'm looking at Jose, because Jose, he started the Collegiate Wind Competition. And so I'm curious what you think in terms of the funding. Is that the right amount? Or? Mm-hmm. Exactly. Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. Mhm. Mhm.
Usually a professor to allow for his or her hours to give them guidance, and I think students will graduate eventually, hopefully end up in this industry. The advisor is the pulse that stays in school, a champion for it,
Mhm.
and learns from it and disseminates that learning to the next generation. So a little bit of funding for the advisors to secure some hours should be considered.
Absolutely. Thank you. No, see, I knew you had good ideas. Thanks, Jose. Yeah. Oh, no, no. There's multiple. Go ahead, Jose. Well, that's up for debate. We haven't decided that, but there will be multiple schools. And we've discussed, the Hydro Foundation has done think tank programs in the past, which is why this is such a good partnership. And through those think tanks, rather than having students come in from the same school and have them compete together with maybe students that they know, we've talked about maybe mixing it up. With the think tank, we did that. We put them in teams ourselves, and that way each team was, made up of students from different universities. It kind of forced them to get to know each other, which is a very real world application because we don't always get to work with our friends. It's really cool when we do. But you do have to work with people you don't know, and you have to figure out different people's strengths and help them to shine in those strengths. So that's been discussed as well in putting this together, is having students mix. Jose has a no.
Just a couple things to think about. So, number of schools.
Mm-hmm.
8 1 year and 10 the other. You don't want to make it overwhelming. Judges. Also consideration. Correct. 10K is the right thing for the school.
Mm-hmm.
You have logistics to the event for the competition, which, depending on the size of the school or size of the team that you're going to see, could double. FYI.
Okay.
At the time we partnered with the American Wind Energy Association, they offer free, not putting anything in NHA, for the students. There's the entry to the event was free, so you don't have to, and the advantage for NHA in this particular, potentially, I don't want to put them on the spot, is that they have next generation students walking the hallways, amplifying the event at their schools. So it is a win-win.
Mm-hmm.
So there is maybe a deal to be.
No pressure. It's fine. Sounds like we have a meeting in our future. Thank you, Jose. That's awesome. And that goes into our selection criteria as well. Next segue is in terms of, types of students. Do we want to focus on undergrad? Do we want to focus on, graduate, or a mix of both? Do we have any thoughts on that? Jose's like out. You've said your piece. Thank you. Have a good day. Undergrads. Okay, well, good. We have that thought. And this really isn't meant to be me talking at you. We definitely want opinions. Yeah. That's good. I'm glad to hear you say that, because
we had girls that were undergraduate, some of you graduate students. So did you find that by participating with students that are in the graduate level, that kind of gives you back your abilities as well? I mean, did you learn a lot in that process that it would be worthwhile to mix them in this type of collegiate competition?
I would say definitely, like even from the preliminary draft experience, we learned a lot from what they had to present, kind of turned like they have expertise beyond what we.
That's awesome. Yeah.
I'm John Ace, I'm with the Corps of Engineers, and so Bree, I'm just kind of throw out just a thought. I don't need a yes or no
Mm-hmm.
on this, but I see mentors, and then I hear the conversation, and I'm just thinking that whether this would be a mentor or part of the team, you know, we have young engineers coming in every year,
Mm-hmm.
and I think it would be a real benefit to have one or two of those people on the team. So learning from others, but also it's kind of a transition or an integration step into the career. So we've got new people that have worked with us a year maybe.
Yeah.
And they may have some things that they could offer, whether it's a competition, whether it is a mentor, or whether it is part of the team.
That's an excellent idea. I like that a lot. And that's, I mean, honestly, that's why we're here. I love it. Thank you. Those are great ideas.
Yeah, one of the things I've seen that very much is you would have an advisor from the faculty who knows limited to one graduate student.
Right.
Limited to one.
Okay. That's great. I appreciate that. Yeah, I think, you know, in terms of, I mean, that brings me back to even the steering committee too, for, you know, selection purposes. The discussion has been had where we've talked about, well, if there's universities, you know, if we have a couple university, you know, professors as part of the committee, is that giving them any kind of advantage if one of, you know, if their students apply versus other universities? We think that the expertise is important, you know, to have, but I'm curious what you guys think in terms of, you know, whether you think that's any kind of conflict. Yeah. Sure. Yeah. To get around that.
We did that in the research awards program.
Right.
The steering committee had professors selecting the students. They were very good about recusing themselves when it was a student application that they could do these students.
Sure.
So I think that process.
Awesome. Good. Cool. Would you go to the next slide, please? So beyond the application process, these are just a couple ideas in terms of the theme. We're talking obviously a lot about clean energy and getting into integration with other renewables. And so that was kind of a thought as a possible theme. What we heard from our STEM dialogue workshop was, you know, they really are thinking this first year should be we should stick to basics and keep it simple for a rollout year. But I'm curious, you know, what you all think about that. Stop. Sorry, I keep talking, but ultimately I want you guys to chime in anytime. But we could change the theme each year. It could be different, or what's up, Colin?
So that's kind of like the scope of our presentation
Mm-hmm.
today. That there's some innovation built into that, what mix of resources do you have, but you know, like conventional thinking is more or less one way to do it. You have intermittent renewables and you have storage. So maybe some like areas for opportunity where the student can innovate themselves outside of the sort of set problem. So like alternative value stream for hydropower, or what non-power benefits do.
Mm-hmm. That's cool.
So innovation would be part of the concept to provide something beyond the question itself.
Yeah. So like you wanna understand, you know, at least for this project we have your core set of skills, doing the engineering hydropower, that's, you know, the math of it. But, you know, you want to make sure that they have areas to integrate.
And for those of you who don't know, what the project he's talking about is our Think Tank Unplugged competition, which they'll be presenting these projects later today at 4 o'clock. But they have created their own concepts of a renewable energy city of the future, using all of the renewable integrations. So that's what he's referring to, is to kind of, obviously this was a shorter term project. They had a few weeks to work on it, whereas this would be, you know, much longer, so it could be a little bit more in depth.
I know when it comes to a lot of these, talking about the future hydropower
Mm-hmm.
and building more support for integration of life. So I hope that we would be able to expand not just within engineering, but within environmental sciences,
Mm-hmm.
areas where we know we need that type of thinking from the industry to help us address some of the issues for the future and build wider support. So I would make sure that we expand the schools we're looking at, and it's not just engineering or the schools that are involved in perhaps operations or efficiency, but we're looking at the social side
Mm-hmm.
of hydro as well. Because I think
Absolutely, absolutely. In which case, you know, we do want to make sure that we're catering to all universities and being extremely inclusive. We've also talked about incorporating different disciplines, like you said, and even beyond. You know, it includes some of these marketing majors into it because, you know, I talked to Andy at Newstream yesterday, and they're hiring salespeople, they're hiring marketing people. You know, so there are accountant jobs out there. You know, there's lots of jobs in hydro that have nothing to do with engineering. So we've talked a lot about how to incorporate those other disciplines.
So environmental science.
Absolutely.
In addition to this,
Mm-hmm.
we could have a different set of issues for them to tackle.
Absolutely. Cool stuff. Next slide, please. So, you know, we're kind of thinking with a first year competition that we could kind of keep it in the simple realm. We could keep it at a case study where they can, you know, kind of come up with their plan, their systems integration, and then also incorporate some outreach into it, which would require them to actually talk to some people within the industry to do some research on their ideas to make sure that they can back up whatever it is that their, you know, concept is. So that's kind of a thought for the first year, and then maybe the second year, you know, we could do the case study, but then also extend it into having some design analysis and maybe even, you know, build and test option. It gets a little more complicated with hydro depending on what the project is in terms of building and testing and kind of figuring out the logistics of that. But, you know, thoughts include, you know, having the students do a lot of the build and test prior to any kind of actual competition, you know, and be able to utilize their university facilities for that kind of stuff, or even industry. You know, there's plenty of room at the TSC lab, you know, with the Bureau of Reclamation. I'm sure that there are opportunities there. So that's just one thought. Does anybody have any thoughts in terms of doing design on the first year or any kind of build and test component in the first year, or do you think waiting to the second year is better? Go ahead.
One idea that kind of comment, we had a class called Business on Campus. So you could build a hydropower plant. This project where you work on existing departments. Next year, here's the idea. First year, here's the idea, and we probably be small scale. Make a business.
Right. So with that, would you have the same students then for the second year? Like, because if you're doing the design for the first year and then sticking with that same,
Well, that was my thought.
yeah. Mm-hmm. It's cool. Yeah. Yeah.
A lot
Right.
But I do think, you know, you look at like the solar competition, and they started with the build design, right? And
Right.
they realized that they wanted to get on the second component, and so I think their model is kind of neat because they might, I don't know the numbers, but they might have like 10 schools that do the full build design challenge,
Mm-hmm.
but then they have like 15 or 20 other schools that just do the like analytical component. So they were able to run schools without having to significantly up the funding and the logistics. Like not every school has that capability to do that build design.
Right.
So I think it's neat that they kind of have this like two-tier capacity in their program. Might be something to kind of strive for, maybe not in the long run, but eventually.
But have a plan, yeah, for going forward. Oh, that's great. Anybody else? Okay, will you go to the next slide, please? So with, you know, the hydropower plants that are out there right now, there's a lot of them that are up for relicensing. We heard that yesterday in Malcolm's talk. And so we thought, you know, that might be an option as well. And just, you know, putting together kind of an idea, you know, on how to, you know, maybe shorten that process. If there's a way to do that, and if that's something that we could give these students to think about and go through the process of talking to industry and talking to FERC and talking to the folks in licensing to see you know what the regulatory process is. They'd have to learn about that and then figure out if there's a way, you know, to condense it. I'm sure we would all like to know, but that's one thought, you know. So I'm curious, that's something that you think would gain the interest of students. That's
Just an opinion.
Mhm.
I like A, but B is the second option is probably a lot more reality for folks that are coming into the workforce
Mhm.
of rehabbing a 70 to 100-year-old facility. That feels like a bit too much, though, of all the different options, and you know, I want to hear your comment, but it feels like that there's a lot of pieces in there, but they're very complex pieces in there, and so maybe scaling back a little bit. And so taking out the protecting the river system with the fish passage, or you know, some of the complex environmental pieces, that just sticking with the engineering side of the investment and the upgrades to maintain the facility for the.
Or you can
Right.
take the whole program, split it into various pieces. So from an environmental standpoint, that can be different people working on that.
That's true.
Versus those who are looking at specifically what you have to do to upgrade the plant.
So kind of put them together. That would be cool.
Yeah, you know, I was looking at this, and, you know, I love the second one. Obviously, the licensing is a huge issue, it's 40%, 40% of the getting coming up. Older plants, for the most part, small, it'd be a great case study for them, but if your theme is, you're gonna continue with the theme of integration, you're gonna have to figure out how do you mix that with your overall theme of integration. Because you're upgrading the plant, that doesn't mean you're gonna necessarily integrate new market. So that's another component of it. But the first one, you're really working to try and ensure that you're integrating into the grid system, and you've got a larger support component to integrate that, particularly the project you've upgraded. So in a way, it's almost a combination of both that you're looking at in order to keep the theme. Or unless you're just upgrading the plant.
I hear that, and I'm just thinking from a student perspective. So who is actually trying to integrate all the renewables in the system? And what's the reality of them walking into a job where, you know, that might be a power utility that has that big picture, but a lot of what our new engineers are coming into is they're, you know, go fix this dam or go design this new small hydropower on a.
But it's not necessarily moving into the integration.
I understand what you're saying.
Unless you're going to really focus in on market policies and what's going on in the market areas.
But
So
that's
it's
a
a more
different, to me,
complex
that's a
problem.
different skill set.
Right.
And maybe that's just another piece of it, but, you know, you're looking there at the ISOs and how they integrate the system. It's not so much a regional planning board, it's an ISO.
Right,
So,
so nice.
again, they have different skills, different students, doing different things. That's more of a business planning.
Well, the business
Right.
schools, they're there with even business schools, you know, they're into ISOs, RTOs.
I think if you
It
put
could
them
even
in
be
these
your political
modules,
science departments.
if you create modules around this thing for different skill sets, you can apply them depending on what school and what interest you get.
So I think the bottom line is the case study concept, a little more complex than just seeing the other one.
Right.
It's going to be a little broader.
I could add a comment. I think we also want to think about what sound features in the students.
Mhm.
Like, I can tell you that the idea of coming up with PERC regulation and paperwork is
Matt.
like, it was like not that interesting. And realistically, most university professors are not well skilled in approach to licensure.
Right.
So this one, you're coming up with like the activities and stuff. I would just keep that in mind. That's of interest.
Mhm.
Pilot paperwork and federal government. Although it's important, it's good to know about, and probably not going to like draw crowds or be super sexy to show off how awesome your project was afterwards.
Sure. Ken?
So the relicensing itself is not the fun part. But certainly deciding whether to relicense
Yeah.
is something that so many people are going to be going through in the next 10 years. This is a very real world application and may well find a good audience in some of these places to bring in some outside help in that analysis.
Well, and there might, sorry, go ahead, Ken. You had a comment.
I was just gonna say, so, this is a little bit different. So I realized the project all my peers.
Mhm.
I mean, you would have to, not let it get too big, but you could, because I mean, like right now, I mean, we're going through a relicensing right now that involves possible year permanent, we're looking at air rating, also involved adding a minimum quote, you know, looking at, you know, the recommendation.
Mhm.
I mean, so you could really weave all of these components together and cover all of these positions with a, you know, relicensing policy, you know, you can all over the environment.
Well, and it's probably all in the way you write it, right? Like, in order for it to sound enticing to students and make them want to do it. And that actually segues nice into the next slide, if you will. We're in just talking about, you know, the multidisciplinary expertise within the team and having them kind of develop a detailed plan for stakeholders. And then make sure, like Linda said, you know, that they're focusing on the social aspects, be able to justify their project across the social and economic environmental variables. And if there's risks and rewards, you know, ultimately there's always both sides. But there could be the technical side, the economic side, environmental and social. So we are trying to look at all of those aspects. But is there something that we're missing? Like, are there other pieces that we should be paying attention to? Yeah, Michael.
Something just came to mind. It was based on one of the things Kirby was saying is desperately needed in our industry. Valuation part.
Right.
And I know folks at some of the labs are working on very specific economic value. What he was sharing resonated with me of the impacts to communities before these projects were developed.
Mm.
I was thinking the case study could bring the history of a project developed, benefit from lands and taking maybe an economically challenged area and then bringing a reservoir, bringing a tax base. And it would teach folks the history of hydropower. Yet there's economics and there's engineering from improving the grid stability. There's now the future forward of now integration of renewables. I think, and if we did that regionally, it actually could help answer the problem that Kirby is looking for a business case justification for the new hydro. Because it's a long-term
Right.
strategic benefit to the community, but it also provides some of the missing pieces, which are really soft costs. Because what the national labs are doing for us are very specific of how does a project have a market.
Right.
Just thinking from a totality, a
case study like that might be something somebody doesn't have for 30, 40 years in the industry and can still find some tangible pieces.
Right. Well, and see the whole big picture, right? It's easier to maybe plan, put together a project. Yeah, that's great. I love that. Anybody else? Yeah.
Sort of one comment about the last slide that would be licensing
Mhm.
idea. It might require a lot of information about a particular site. Things have changed, and then you really want to write a case study. So you're doing like a non-power dam, power and power dam, but have more of a blank slate, build up innovate, and also as a kind of community with other social and environmental issues.
Right. It's good to think about. Next slide, please. Thank you. One of the things that we've learned through the MEC, the Marine Energy Collegiate Competition, is that students have been required to get out there in industry and in the community to share their ideas and make sure that they're talking to stakeholders so that, for one, we know what their thoughts are, but also what's important to them, and make sure that we're covering that. They need to be able to showcase their work and spread the message about the competition. So I think ultimately it helps the competition grow in the future when they're doing this, because it gets more people involved. So I think in terms of, the wind competition has grown, immensely over the years. And so we obviously only want the best for this one too. It takes a lot of resources and effort to put one on. So we don't want it to be just a one-time thing. We would want it to be something that grew in the future. So this piece of it has proven with other competitions to be the key to getting that to move forward. So is there any, in terms of the industry and community outreach, is there anything that that we should be thinking about that we should add to? Are there things that the students should be doing in their outreach to make sure, we're covering all the bases? And maybe not, we're closing up here in our time together, but I think that, when we talk about the HCC or any of the competitions, I want, to make sure that you all know that we're constantly taking that feedback in. So as you go through the conference today, make sure that you're thinking of ideas, and if you want to email those to us or, catch me at the conference, I'm happy to talk about it. Go ahead, Mark. Acronyms, yeah. I've been saying for the longest time we need to have like a directory, of acronyms all spelled out, to hand to new folks in the industry, because there's a lot of them. But that's a very good point. I think that, coming in with fresh eyes and fresh ears, you don't know the language. And so if we can make that easier, then I think that would be more appealing to young people, especially, as someone who's not an engineer. It's really intimidating standing around talking to engineers about hydro. And so I think that when we talk about having a competition where we're integrating other disciplines, I think we need to consider that, make it something that's exciting, and make, people that are not engineers feel like, okay, I can handle this. Like, I can do this. And it's not over their head and they're like, I'm not going to go do a competition with a bunch of engineers. That could be really intimidating. So that's, at least in my mind, that's something I'm trying to work through, of what can we do in order to cater to that type of discipline, get those students interested. Well, we are at our time. if over a little bit. So I don't want to keep you for very long, but do catch me if you come up with thoughts or, think of something later in the day. And for those of you who tuned in virtually, I appreciate it. Really nice to have both. Do you want to put the screen back up so we can just wave goodbye to them? You can see yourselves. All right. Bye. All right. Thanks, everybody. I hope you guys have a great day. Bye. Bye, Susan.